On a raw, cold morning in Birmingham, Alabama, the kind of cold that shows your breath and stings your fingertips, the world outside the Children's Medical Center moved in a frantic blur. People bundled in scarves clutched coffee cups, their hurried pace a desperate attempt to outrun the sorrow that lingered within the hospital's walls. But one person wasn't moving. Near the revolving doors, sitting on a flattened cardboard box, was a 9-year-old boy named Ezekiel Zeke Carter. He was small for his age, engulfed in a coat a size too big, its sleeves rolled up to reveal thin wrists. One of his boots was patched with a cross of gray duct tape. He wasn't begging or asking for anything, just quietly drawing in a weather-beaten notebook, observing the endless parade of worry and fear. He was a fixture on Saturdays, a silent sentinel whom the hospital staff had long given up trying to shoo away. Across the street, the engine of a dark silver Range Rover idled, its silent hum a stark contrast to the anxiety of its driver. Jonathan Reeves, a man in his late 40s with a sharp jawline and graying temples, looked like a man who had everything and nothing all at once. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened as if in defeat. He had money, but it was a currency that held no value in the place that mattered most. In the back, his 6-year-old daughter, Isla, sat strapped into a booster seat, her brown curls tucked behind one ear. Her eyes were wide open, staring at a world she could no longer run in. An accident had stolen the feeling from her legs, leaving behind a crushing silence that had filled their home. Jonathan unbuckled his seatbelt, the simple click echoing the finality he felt every time he brought her here. He opened the back door and scooped her up, her body feeling impossibly light, and carried her toward the entrance. He didn't notice Zeke at first. Most people didn't. But Zeke noticed him. He saw the way Jonathan held his daughter, as if she were made of glass, the way her own eyes stayed fixed on the sky, avoiding the building that represented her brokenness. As they were about to pass, Zeke stood up, his small voice cutting through the morning chill with impossible clarity. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Jonathan stopped mid-stride. The words hung in the air, not as a taunt or a trick, but as a simple statement of fact. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in the boy's worn clothes and taped-up boot. "What did you just say?" "I said," Zeke repeated, his gaze unwavering, "I can help her walk again." "That's not funny, kid," Jonathan snapped, his arms tightening around Isla. "I wasn't joking," Zeke replied, his voice calm and steady. It was the stillness in him, a grown-up gravity in a child's body, that unsettled Jonathan the most. This had to be a scam. He turned without another word and walked through the revolving doors. Inside, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the muted beeps of machines did little to calm him. For hours, he sat through Isla's appointments, listening to the familiar litany of phrases, managing expectations, a long road ahead, no guarantees. The specialists were kind, their expertise unquestionable, but their words were hollow, devoid of the one thing he desperately needed, hope. Through it all, the boy's voice echoed in his mind, a stubborn, inexplicable refrain, "I can make your daughter walk again." By early afternoon, when they stepped back out into the sharp cold, Zeke was still there. Same box, same notebook. He looked up as they emerged, his eyes meeting Jonathan's as if he had been waiting, certain he would return. Jonathan hesitated. He looked down at Isla, her head resting on his shoulder, her small face pale. He felt a surge of protective anger, but something else was there too, a sliver of desperation so sharp it was painful. "You again," he muttered, walking over. "Why would you say something like that? You don't know the first thing about her, about what we've been through." "I don't have to know her to help," Zeke said, his calm unshaken. "You're a little boy sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes," Jonathan said, his voice laced with frustration. "What could you possibly know about helping my daughter?" Zeke looked down at his notebook. "My mama used to help people walk again," he said quietly. "She was a physical therapist. She taught me stuff. She said the body remembers even when the mind forgets for a while." He looked up, his eyes clear and direct. "I watched her help a man walk after being in a chair for 5 years. She didn't have machines, just her hands, her patience and faith." Jonathan opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He saw a passing nurse give Zeke a small familiar wave. He saw a janitor nod in the boy's direction. This child was known here. "I'm not giving you money," Jonathan said, testing him. "I didn't ask for any." "Then what do you want?" Zeke took a deep breath. "Just 1 hour. Let me show you." Jonathan looked from the boy's earnest face to his daughter, who had opened her eyes and was watching them both with quiet curiosity. He should walk away, he should call security. But he was a man running out of options, a man drowning in the silence of his own home. He sighed, the sound a white flag of surrender. "Fine. Harrington Park, tomorrow at noon. Don't be late." Zeke nodded once. "I'll be there." That night, after putting Isla to bed, Jonathan sat in his home office, staring at a picture of her taken before the accident, a vibrant, laughing girl mid-jump on a trampoline. The silence of the house felt heavier than usual. Isla appeared in the doorway, her fingers walking along the frame of her wheelchair. "Daddy," she asked, "who was that boy?" "Just somebody we met," Jonathan said. "He looked like he believed it," she said softly. "Believed what, baby?" "That I could walk." For the first time in months, something other than despair stirred in Jonathan's chest. It felt dangerous. It felt like hope. Harrington Park was a forgotten square of green with a cracked basketball court and squeaky swings. On a Sunday at noon, it was deserted. But Zeke was already there, sitting on a bench, a small gym bag at his feet. When Jonathan's SUV pulled up, he stood. He had the same oversized jacket, but his gaze was focused and professional. "Hi again," he said politely, as Jonathan wheeled a silent Isla over. "Hi, Isa," Zeke said, smiling directly at her. Isla's eyes lit up. "Hi. How do you know her name?" Jonathan asked, an eyebrow raised. "You said it yesterday," Zeke replied. "I remember stuff." He gestured to a folded towel on the bench. "So what now?" Jonathan asked, his arms crossed tightly. "A magic carpet ride?" Zeke ignored the sarcasm. He opened his bag and pulled out a pair of thick socks, a tennis ball, a small jar of cocoa butter, and a plastic container filled with what looked like warm rice wrapped in a cloth. "My mom used these," he explained. "The rice is for heat, to loosen tight muscles. The ball is for pressure points." He turned to Isla. "If it's okay, can I work with your legs? I promise nothing will hurt. If anything feels weird, just say stop." Isla looked at her dad, who gave a reluctant sigh. "You can try. Just be careful." Zeke knelt beside her chair and gently unwrapped the blanket from her legs. He placed the warm rice pack over her thighs. "Too hot?" he asked. She shook her head. "It feels good." After a few minutes, he began to move her legs in small, gentle rotations. He didn't force anything. His touch was confident and sure. While he worked, he talked to her, asking about her favorite colors and cartoons. At first, her answers were shy whispers, but soon she was asking him questions back. "Do you live around here?" "Kind of. Why don't you go to school anymore?" Zeke hesitated. "My mom got sick, then she passed. Been trying to figure things out since." "I'm sorry," Isla whispered. Jonathan's posture softened as he listened. After 30 minutes, Zeke gently tapped her ankle. "You feel that?" Isla blinked. "A little, like pressure." Zeke looked up at Jonathan. "That's good. She sometimes says that during her regular sessions," Jonathan said, still guarded. "Yeah," Zeke replied, "but those sessions are in a room full of machines. Sometimes kids get scared of machines. They tighten up. Out here," he gestured to the open park, "there's air, trees. It feels different." Before they left, Zeke showed Jonathan some simple movements to try with her toes. Nothing happened, but Isla didn't look discouraged. "It takes time," Zeke told her, "but your muscles, they still remember how to be used. You just got to remind them." For the first time in a long time, Isla smiled a big, genuine smile. As they were leaving, Jonathan pulled a folded bill from his pocket and held it out. Zeke stepped back. "No, sir, I don't want your money." "Then why are you doing this?" Jonathan asked, bewildered. Zeke shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Because your daughter smiled." The following Sunday was warmer. Jonathan arrived to find Zeke waiting as promised. This time, there was less tension. Jonathan even brought an extra bottle of water and silently placed it beside Zeke's bag. The session began with the same gentle routine, but today, Isla was an active participant. "Can you press your heel into the ground?" Zeke asked. She closed her eyes, concentrating with all her might. Nothing happened. "It's okay," he said. "Sometimes it takes your brain a while to find the right path. It's like trying to walk through a crowd. You just got to push through." Jonathan found himself kneeling on the grass, watching every movement, no longer a skeptic but a student. "Why do you do this?" he asked again, his tone different this time, softer. Zeke glanced up. "Because I remember what it felt like when my mom helped people. She made them feel like they mattered again. I want to do that too." As he spoke, Isla's toes, which had been still for months, gave a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. It was a flicker of life, a spark in the darkness, and for the first time, Jonathan allowed himself to truly believe. Their Sundays at the park became a ritual. Zeke taught Isla how to use rubber bands to strengthen her ankles, and showed Jonathan how to massage pressure points behind her knees. He explained how each nerve had a job, even the quiet ones. Then came the fourth Sunday. The air was heavy with unspoken tension. When the SUV pulled up, Isla wasn't smiling. "She doesn't want to do it today," Jonathan said sharply. Isla sat in her chair, arms crossed, refusing to look at Zeke. "I tried to move my legs this morning and nothing happened," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I'm tired of trying. It's pointless." Zeke knelt beside her. "You think I never get tired?" he asked gently. "You think I didn't cry when my mom couldn't afford medicine and I had to just sit there and watch?" Isla's eyes shifted toward him. "You're allowed to be mad," he continued. "But if you stop now, the part of you that wants to walk might stop trying too. I don't want you to give up, because I haven't." "I'm scared," she whispered, the admission so quiet Jonathan almost missed it. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. "I am too," Zeke said, "but scared don't mean stop. It just means you're close to something big." Isla wiped her face. "Okay, let's try again." They worked through the motions, and after 30 minutes of patient encouragement, Isla moved her right foot. Not just a toe, her whole foot. It slid forward, slow and stiff, but it moved. Jonathan dropped to his knees beside her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Do it again," he breathed. And she did. That night, something inside Jonathan shifted. The wall of guilt and pride he had built around himself began to crumble. On Monday, he sat in his office and typed Ezekiel Carter Birmingham into a search engine. The results were sparse, just a few mentions of Zeke and his mother, Monique Carter, at a community clinic. He was a ghost. By the next Saturday, things had changed. Jonathan brought a mat and a sandwich for Zeke. He participated fully in the session, listening to Zeke's instructions, even laughing when Zeke corrected his form. "All right, Issa," Zeke said, "let's try something different." He showed Jonathan how to hold a belt under her knees for balance. "She's going to try to lift both knees now. She controls the movement." Isla's brow furrowed in concentration. She grunted softly, and then her knees lifted, barely an inch, but they lifted. "You did that?" Jonathan asked, his voice choked with emotion. "I did it," she beamed. After the session, as they packed up, Jonathan crouched beside Zeke. "Where do you go after this?" "Around," Zeke shrugged. "Do you have a place to sleep?" Jonathan asked softly. Zeke hesitated. "Sometimes." The word hung in the air between them. Jonathan took a deep breath. "You ever think about coming to stay with us for a while? I've got a guest room." Zeke's eyes widened. "You serious? After what you've done for my daughter," Jonathan said, his voice thick. "I'm dead serious." The next morning, Zeke arrived at their front door with a small backpack and a rolled-up blanket. "Welcome home," Jonathan said, stepping aside. The days that followed were filled with the quiet sounds of healing. Zeke got his own room, and more importantly, a place to belong. He and Isla started every morning with stretches, and soon she was moving both feet with increasing confidence. The story of the boy in the park began to spread. It started with a nurse from the hospital who saw Isla lifting her knees. She told a colleague. Soon other families began showing up at Harrington Park on Sundays. The first week, it was 2 families. The next, 5. By the following month, a crowd of nearly 24 gathered every Sunday. A local pastor brought folding chairs. A nearby diner dropped off coffee and bagels. Someone printed flyers, free movement classes, Sundays at noon. A local reporter appeared one day, and Jonathan shielded Zeke. "You okay with this?" he asked. Zeke looked at the families, at the kids trying so hard, at Isla laughing with a girl on a walker. "As long as it's not about me," he said, "it's about them." The article ran under the headline, "The Boy Healer of Harrington Park." It brought more people, more hope, and even a few skeptical doctors who came to observe. But Zeke remained unchanged. He still laid out the same towel, still used the same simple tools, and still checked in with Isla first. The park, once empty and forgotten, had become a sanctuary. A boy who had no home had become the heart of a community. It had been 9 Sundays. This Sunday was different. The air was warm, and a sense of anticipation hummed among the crowd. When they arrived, Zeke unpacked his bag and gave Isla a knowing look. "You ready?" She nodded, her expression serious and determined. Jonathan wheeled her to the center of a mat. "Same as before," Zeke said softly. "We help you stand. You do the rest." Jonathan stood behind her, his hands under her arms. Zeke took her legs, guiding them into place. "On 3, Zeke whispered. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan lifted. Zeke steadied her knees. And then, she stood. Her legs trembled, but she was up, on her own 2 feet. The crowd fell silent. Isla opened her eyes, and a slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. "I'm standing." Jonathan let go. She stayed up. He stepped back, his entire body shaking. "She's doing it." Then, Isla took one shaky step, then another, and then a third, before stumbling into her father's waiting arms. He caught her, laughing and crying all at once, holding her tight. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Over his shoulder, Isla looked at Zeke. "You said I would." He gave her a small grin. "I said we'd try." That night, as Zeke poured cereal in the kitchen, Jonathan leaned against the counter. "You know, you changed everything," he said. "My daughter walked today. Not because of a hospital or a miracle drug. She walked because a kid with nothing decided to show up, again and again." Zeke nodded. "That's what my mom would have done." "I wish she could have seen this," Jonathan said, his throat tight. "She did," Zeke said softly, looking out the window at the night sky. "I think she sees everything. There are people in this world who may not have degrees or shiny resumes, but they carry something far more valuable, a reason to keep showing up. Sometimes, the most broken people are the ones holding the tools to help others heal." The boy with the duct-taped boots hadn't just taught a girl how to walk, he had taught a man how to hope, and a community how to come together. In a forgotten park, under a big oak tree, he had shown them all that the quietest acts of persistence could make the most beautiful noise. The day Alla walked was not an ending, but the cracking open of a door. The story of the boy healer of Harrington Park became a quiet legend in Birmingham, spreading beyond the initial newspaper article. The Sundays grew, not in chaos, but in a strange, beautiful order. Jonathan, using his business acumen, helped organize it. Tents were donated for shade, mats were laid out in neat rows, and a retired physical therapist, inspired by the story, began volunteering, offering medical advice and ensuring no one pushed themselves too far. Zeke remained the quiet center of it all. He now had a home, a real bed with clean sheets, and 3 meals a day. Jonathan had enrolled him in a local school where he was predictably quiet but absorbed everything like a sponge. For the first time, Zeke's world wasn't about survival, it was about living. He and Alla had become inseparable, their bond forged in shared vulnerability and triumph. He was no longer just her healer, he was her brother. But the world has a way of questioning things that seem too good to be true. The first sign of trouble arrived in a crisp, manila envelope from the Alabama Department of Human Resources. An anonymous complaint had been filed. It raised concerns about an unlicensed minor, living with an unrelated single man, and allegations of unregulated medical treatments being performed on children in a public park. Jonathan, a man used to solving problems with a checkbook or a sharp-tongued lawyer, felt a cold dread he hadn't experienced since Alla's accident. This was a battle he couldn't easily win. The system, with its rigid rules and lack of nuance, had no box to put Zeke in. A week later, a woman named Ms. Albright, her expression professionally neutral, sat in their pristine living room. She was polite, her questions direct. She asked Zeke where he had been living before, about his mother, about his lack of a legal guardian. Zeke answered in his usual soft, direct way, but Jonathan could see the boy withdrawing, the old fear returning to his eyes. He saw the child who had sat on a cardboard box, bracing for the world to be unkind. "Mr. Reeves," Albright said, her pen poised over her notepad, "I understand your intentions are good, but from the department's perspective, this is a highly irregular situation. Ezekiel needs stability, a formal education, and a legal guardian. And while the work at the park is remarkable, from what I've heard, it also opens you both up to enormous liability." Jonathan's temper flared. Liability? A dozen kids who were told they'd hit a plateau are making progress. My own daughter is running. That's not a liability, that's a miracle. The law doesn't have a category for miracles, sir, she replied calmly. The department would have to open a formal case. Zeke would be assigned a state advocate. His living situation was now under review. The news sent a shockwave through the Harrington Park community. The families, who had seen Zeke as a savior, now saw him as a child in peril. They rallied. The nurse who had first seen him, the pastor who brought the chairs, the diner owner, they all wrote letters. Parents sent in videos of their children's progress, testimonials of how Zeke's quiet patience had given them hope when doctors had offered none. Simultaneously, the medical community took notice. Alistair Finch, the head of pediatric neurology at the Children's Medical Center, was a man of science and data. He had read Isla's chart. He knew her prognosis. When he heard that she was not only walking but running, he was professionally intrigued and deeply skeptical. He began attending the Sunday sessions, standing at the periphery, taking notes. He saw no magic, only a boy with an almost preternatural understanding of the body's mechanics, and a boundless well of patience. He watched Zeke show a father how to gently rotate his son's atrophied calf muscle. He heard him tell a little girl, "It's okay if your foot doesn't want to listen today. We'll just ask it again next week." It wasn't medicine, not in any way he recognized. It was something else. It was connection. The pressure mounted on Jonathan. His lawyers advised him to cease the park sessions immediately. They told him to distance himself from the case while they handled the DA. But Jonathan looked at Zeke, who had started sleeping with his old, tattered backpack by his bed again, and at Isla, who watched them both with worried eyes, and he knew he couldn't. The breaking point came during a formal meeting with Ms. Albright and her supervisor. Jonathan's lawyers were there, armed with statutes and precedents, but Jonathan stopped them. "This isn't about legal loopholes," he said, his voice steady. "This is about a boy who lost everything and decided his purpose was to... He slept on cardboard and used his mother's memory to heal my daughter. He asked for nothing. Now, he's part of my family. If you take him away, you're not putting him in a stable environment. You're breaking his heart. You're breaking my daughter's heart. And you're breaking mine." As he spoke, the door to the conference room opened. Dr. Finch walked in, holding a thick file. "Excuse the interruption," he said, addressing the room. "I was asked by the hospital to provide a medical opinion. I have reviewed the case files of 17 children who attend the sessions at Harrington Park. In 15 of those cases, patients have shown significant, documented improvement in motor function and muscle response that defies their initial prognosis." He placed the file on the table. "I cannot explain Ezekiel Carter's methods in medical terminology. It is not science as I practice it. But I am also a doctor who has seen the limits of what science can do. What that boy does is facilitate hope. He empowers parents. He connects with children on a level my colleagues and I rarely can. To disrupt that, to punish it, because it doesn't fit into our established boxes, would not just be a bureaucratic failure. It would be a moral one." The room was silent. Albright looked from the doctor to Jonathan, and then to the stack of letters from the Harrington Park families on her desk. In the end, a solution was found, one built on the foundation of community Zeke had created. Jonathan began the formal, legal process of adopting Zeke, becoming his father in the eyes of the law as he already was in his heart. Dr. Finch helped Jonathan establish a non-profit organization named the Monique Carter Foundation to support the work at the park. It provided liability insurance, proper equipment, and a framework that satisfied the state, ensuring the Sunday sessions could continue safely and legally. Dr. Finch even volunteered to be on the advisory board. A year later, on a warm Sunday afternoon, Harrington Park was vibrant. The squeak of the swings was now drowned out by the laughter of children. Zeke, now 10 and a half, stood near the big oak tree, showing a new mother how to use a warm rice pack. He looked taller, his face had lost some of its gauntness, and he wore a new pair of boots. No duct tape in sight. Isla, her brown curls bouncing, raced a boy with leg braces across the field. She was winning. Jonathan sat on a bench, not with his arms crossed, but with a thermos of coffee watching his children. He was no longer the man in the idling Range Rover, a prisoner of his own wealth and despair. He was just a father, watching a miracle unfold on a patch of grass. Later, as the sun began to set, Zeke came and sat beside him. They watched Isla chasing fireflies. "You know," Jonathan said quietly, "your mom would be so proud of you." Zeke leaned his head against Jonathan's shoulder, a gesture of easy, familiar affection. "I know," he said. "She's not gone, she's just everywhere now." And in the fading light of a Birmingham evening, surrounded by the quiet hum of a community built on hope, Jonathan knew he was right. The healing hadn't stopped with Isla's first step. It had just begun. The years that followed were a study in quiet transformation. Zeke, no longer the boy on the cardboard box, became Ezekiel Reeves, The duct-taped boots were replaced by sneakers worn down from games of tag with Isla in the backyard. He was 13 now, lanky and thoughtful, with the same steady eyes that had first stopped Jonathan in his track. His notebook was no longer a solitary refuge but was filled with anatomical sketches and notes, a bridge between his mother's teachings and the science textbooks Jonathan bought for him. The Monique Carter Foundation had become a Birmingham institution. The Sunday sessions at Harrington Park were a beautiful, organized chaos. Physical therapists volunteered alongside parents, and Dr. Finch had secured a partnership with the university, bringing in students who learned more from Zeke's intuitive approach than any textbook could teach them. Jonathan, having sold his stake in his old firm, now ran the foundation full-time. His days were filled with grant proposals and logistics, but his true work, he knew, was being a father. Isla, at 10, was a whirlwind of energy. She played soccer, her movements fluid and strong, with only a slight, almost imperceptible limp when she was tired, a quiet reminder of the journey she'd taken. To her, Zeke was not a healer or a miracle worker. He was the brother who helped her with her math homework and knew exactly how she liked her grilled cheese. Their shared past was the invisible foundation of their bond, as solid and unspoken as the ground beneath their feet. But success, even the purest kind, casts a long shadow. With the foundation's growth came a different kind of pressure. National news outlets had picked up the story. They called Zeke a faith healer, a child prodigy, a miracle worker. The labels made him deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't any of those things. He was just Zeke. The challenge arrived on a crisp autumn Sunday in the form of a boy named Leo. He was 8 years old, with huge, dark eyes that seemed to absorb all the light in the room, leaving none for himself. Leo hadn't suffered an accident. A rare neurological disorder was slowly stealing his mobility, and with it, his will. He arrived in a state-of-the-art wheelchair, pushed by parents whose desperation was a tangible force. They had flown in from California, having seen a segment on TV. They were looking for a miracle, and they believed Zeke was the one who could provide it. Zeke knelt beside Leo's chair, just as he had done with Isla all those years ago. "Hi, Leo," he said softly. Leo didn't respond. He didn't even blink. For weeks, Zeke tried. He used the warm rice packs, the gentle stretches, the quiet encouragement, but Leo's body remained limp and unresponsive. His muscles didn't resist. They simply gave way, as if they had already surrendered. For the first time since he had started, Zeke felt a profound sense of helplessness. His gift, his intuition, the memory of his mother's hands, none of it was working. Leo's father, a tech executive named Mark, grew increasingly impatient. "I read the articles," he said to Jonathan one afternoon, his voice tight with frustration. "They said your boy had a gift. We've been here a month. I'm seeing nothing." The pressure began to wear on Zeke. At school, he was distracted. He got into a fight for the first time when a classmate called him Jesus Jr. He came home with a bruised cheek and a storm in his eyes. "They don't get it," he told Jonathan that night, his voice cracking with adolescent frustration. "They think I can just fix people. But I can't fix Leo. There's nothing there to remind. It's like his body is forgetting on purpose." Jonathan sat with him, not as the head of a foundation, but as a dad. "Your mom," he said carefully, "did everyone she worked with get better?" Zeke shook his head. "No, some just hurt less. She used to say, sometimes the best you can do is help someone carry what they've got." The next Sunday, Zeke approached Leo differently. He didn't bring his bag of tools. He just brought his sketchbook. He sat on the grass beside Leo's wheelchair and began to draw. He didn't talk about walking or muscles. He just sat in the silence with him. After an hour, he tore a page from his notebook and handed it to Leo. It was a detailed, beautiful sketch of a hawk he'd seen circling the park. Leo's eyes flickered down to the drawing. His fingers, which had been limp for weeks, twitched. Slowly, painstakingly, he reached out and took the paper. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a connection. Zeke realized then what his mother had meant. He couldn't heal Leo's disease. He couldn't make his legs work. but he could sit with him in the darkness. He could help him carry the weight of. From that day on, his sessions with Leo were about drawing, about listening to music, about simply being present. And slowly, Leo began to emerge from his shell. He started speaking again, whispering questions about Zeke's drawing. He began to use the joystick on his wheelchair to follow Zeke around the park. He wasn't walking, but he was living again. This shift rippled through the foundation. Zeke, with a wisdom that seemed to stretch far beyond his 13 years, began to change its focus. He started a peer mentorship program, pairing older kids who had been through the sessions with newcomers. He insisted on creating a support group for the parents, run by Jonathan. He taught them that the goal wasn't always to walk away from the wheelchair, but to find the strength to live a full life, with or without it. The Monique Carter Foundation became less about fixing bodies, and more about mending spirit. One evening in the spring, Jonathan found Zeke on the front porch, staring at the stars. He was a young man now on the cusp of his own future. "I've been thinking," Zeke said, not looking away from the sky. "When I go to college, I want to study biomechanics, but psychology too." Jonathan smiled. "Why both?" "Because you can't understand how a body works if you don't understand the person inside it," Zeke said. "My mom knew how to touch the muscles, but her real gift was knowing how to reach the person. That's what I want to learn, how to help them carry it." Jonathan put an arm around his son's shoulders. The boy he had met in desperation had not only saved his daughter but had given his own life a profound and beautiful purpose. In the distance, the front door opened, and Ayla came out, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed them one each, and sat between them, leaning her head on Zeke's shoulder. The boy with the duct-taped boots was gone, but the heart that had offered to heal a stranger's child was still there, beating stronger than ever, getting ready to carry a world of its own.